Okay, yeah, the episode 2 aired. Again, before I get into episode 2, I'm gonna mention a couple things. Thanks for watching, first of all. I was not expecting the first episode to get as many views as it already has. That's quite insane. And I'm expecting a pretty steep, view drop-off in episode 2, which makes sense. I'm not blaming anyone. But if you've already made it to this point, then thanks for showing interest in this series. Because again, the more people show interest in the series, the more likely I am to keep it a continuous thing. Like I said, later on, I'm probably going to start combining episodes. So I do one video about 2 episodes, or just outright skipping episodes, etc, etc. But the more attention this series gets, the more inclined I will be to make this a more consistent thing, just because I know people want it. You know, I mean, of course, at the end of the day, I'm doing these for fun because I want to do them, but, you know, it doesn't hurt to see that my subscribers really want to see more of this. And so if you really want to see more of this, then just keep watching. Yeah, and I do read all the comments and stuff. Second thing is a dub update. Yeah, already, I did say last time, I'd update you when we get more dub information, and we've got more dub information. According to an Anime News Network article I saw, it looks like the dub is returning on the 25th of May. Which makes sense. I think that is the week after the G-dub finishes, so that makes sense. I'm glad we're not taking another hiatus. I feel like that's everything else to get to talk about. I guess we can now get straight into the episode. This episode was almost entirely focused on the card fight between Kai and Aichi, and that makes sense. Yeah, I really liked the card fight. I thought the card fight was really well done for what it was. It was very, very simple. It was a very simple and easy to follow card fight, but that's kind of the point, you know. It's supposed to be something to help introduce people into the franchise. It wasn't of a tutorial card fight, so it makes sense that it would be very, very simple and easy to kind of ease people into it. But simple doesn't mean not good. In fact, for what this card fight was going for, it was really good. It was a really well made card fight, for lots and lots of reasons, the reasons that I'm going to get into now. Yeah, no, first of all, the animation. I know I mentioned the animation in the previous episode, but in this episode it kind of stood out to me a bit more, just because in the very first series of Vanguard, whenever card fights would happen, everything would feel kind of very static. The people were just kind of standing and sitting around, waiting for things to happen. And yeah, sure, it's a card game. That's obviously the point, you know. But the best card games try and make that look interesting. Of course, Yu-Gi-Oh! Has its various gimmicks to try and make the card fights look cooler. Or the duels, I guess. Because it has the motorcycles, and it has the augmented reality, and the entertainment dueling, and the surfboards, you know, it has all this stuff to make the card fight, the duels look more visually interesting than they actually are. Whereas this Vanguard reboot seems to just take the old-fashioned route. It's just, we're just going to animate it well. And they do. They animate it really well. And it makes it look way more lively and interesting than the previous arcs did. Not to say G didn't look visually impressive when it came to its card fights, but it still looked very static. Whenever they'd call units and stuff, they would just kind of stand there until they're told to attack. But with this, it was really interesting because, of course, Vanguard has always gave off the impression and focused on the fact that Planet Cray is a real place that exists. And the cards are real people on Planet Cray. And so this was really cool because in the card fights, the units would interact with each other. I really liked that. That was probably my favorite thing happening in this episode. Yeah, no, whenever Aichi would summon or call a unit to the field, it would start talking to the other units next to it, and they would communicate to each other as if it were a real fight rather than a card fight, you know. So the warriors and units would all be talking to each other, and of course Aichi would take the role as the Vanguard, and so he would be ordering all of the units around him to do stuff, and I really liked that. That was such a cool idea. I seriously, I can't believe they hadn't done that sooner. That's how clever an idea that is. Because, of course, with Vanguard, instead of having holograms or anything, Vanguard does dabble in the hologram thing later on, But especially near the beginning, Vanguard kind of does the whole, instead of holograms, we're going to have it so that the card fight takes place within the character's imagination. So it'll have like two kind of planes going on at the same time. It'll have the real world, which is just two people sitting at a table. And then it will have like the imaginary world of Cray, where it cuts to the actual units fighting each other. And this approach of having all the units talk to each other made that feel more realistic in that regard, because whenever it cut to Cray, it felt like an actual fight that was happening. Again, because there was so much movement going on, the attacks looked way cooler, and there was one part in specific when Aichi called Blaster Blade to the field, and Blaster Blade used his Burst Buster effect or whatever, where he got out his sword and like the two side parts of the sword like flicked open. That part was so cool. Blaster Blade, as far as I'm aware, has never done anything like that before, and it was such a cool thing to do, because he's always had those two lines down his sword, and it's like, do those do anything? They do. Cool. I really like that. Yeah, if there's anything this series has done amazingly well so far, it's all the attention to detail like that. It does a lot of things to keep old viewers interested and invested. Because again, I've seen the first two episodes to the original Vanguard over and over and over again countless times. But watching these two episodes, which basically story beat for story beat remade the first two episodes of the original, I still got invested because of the little things they added here and there. Another thing they changed was the soundtrack. I didn't mention the soundtrack last time, but I am going to this time because it's a very noticeably different soundtrack to the original, which at first I was disappointed with, because I was like, oh no, I really like the original soundtrack. I was kind of hoping they would bring back songs from that and everything. But no, from the sounds of things, I might be wrong here, but from the sounds of things, it is a completely different soundtrack. And honestly, I really like it. Yeah, no, seriously, it managed to make the card fights feel super tense and interesting. And that's another thing, they managed to find subtle ways of adding tension. I mean, this isn't something that Vanguard has only just started doing now, but again, I always really like the damage checks, because it's a cool way of adding suspense, like seeing the characters reveal the top cards from the deck, and it's like, ooh, are they going to get a heal trigger or not? Stuff like that. And yeah, that's something Vanguard's always done, but I really like that here, and I like the execution of it. I really liked, and as you can tell, I'm saying I really liked a lot, because there's honestly nothing to dislike about this episode. Yeah, no, I really liked Kai saying that you learn better by doing, because this series, I mean, I don't think it's debatable, it is a card game advert, and I don't think that makes it any less of an anime. In my eyes, I know a lot of people will kind of look down condescendingly, go, that can't be a good anime, it's a card game advert. But I disagree with that, and I think Kai saying and drawing attention to the whole you learn better by doing quote is a really good way of advertising the real card game, whilst it still fits in the story, because of course in universe he's saying that to Aichi because he's teaching him how to play the game, and that he's teaching him by doing it, by actually card fighting him rather than just kind of telling him everything. He's instead card fighting him, and Aichi's picking things up as he goes. But also this line really works because of course if you break the fourth wall, then he could be saying it to the audience, who he's basically wink wink and nudging to, hey, you should probably buy the new trial decks that come out and actually play with them if you want to get even more invested in the card fights. And that was brilliant. I really liked that a lot. That was such a good way of helping advertise the card game, and I really like the small little things like that. Again, in the first episode, there was a scene where Morikawa was actually opening packs of cards, and again, it's stuff like that Vanguard does that Yu-Gi-Oh! And those other card game animes don't really tend to do, and I really liked it. Of course, the main thing people are probably going to want me to talk about here are the imaginary gifts, and the imaginary gifts are a new thing that they've introduced with this series of Vanguard. It's the new mechanic. It's their version of the synchro summoning, except it's not even remotely like the synchro summoning, so forget I even said that. And that's what I really like. I really like that it isn't just synchro summoning, because when when I started watching G, I was like, oh, I wonder what they're going to add to the card game to like kind of justify the second generation. And then I saw Chrono do like a G stride. I was like, oh, okay, it's just a Unit 4. Okay, yeah, it's a grade 4 unit, cool. It just kind of felt like the most obvious step forward, and I didn't really like that. I was like, eh. I mean, I don't hate the G strides, but it did seem like the most obvious step forward. I was like, you can think of some more creative stuff than that. And the imaginary gifts are definitely a more creative way forward than that. The imaginary gifts give certain grade 3 cards new abilities depending on which free things they are under. And in this episode, we got to see that Kai's Dragonic Overlord was a Force-type imaginary gift, which gave him 10,000 extra power, which is a pretty big advantage, actually. And it'll be interesting to see how they balance that, because the imaginary gifts could really kind of justify Morikawa's strategy. For anyone that doesn't know, Morikawa's strategy in Vanguard is to just summon as many grade 3s as possible. And in the original Vanguard, I mean, anyone that knows anything about a card game knows that's not balanced. You need a combination of everything. You can't just win based on grade 3s. But this new mechanic is definitely giving grade 3s a power boost. And so it's interesting to see later on how that gets balanced. Of course, I'm not the biggest card game expert in the world. I know a bit. But I'm interested to see how they're going to balance that and still make grade 2s viable, for example. I really liked, and this was like a little attention to detail, they show in a flashback scene where it shows Aichi building his deck. It very clearly shows he only has one Blaster Blade. And I assume the reason he only has one Blaster Blade is because they mentioned in the previous episode that Blaster Blade is an incredibly rare card. And so he probably could only get one, because that was the one given to him by Kai. And so earlier, Aichi has a unit on the field and is like, I should probably level this up to Blaster Blade. So he starts his turn, you know, he draws a card, and it isn't Blaster Blade. It's a different, like, level 0 card. And I really like that, because, of course, I feel like this was a direct jab at Yu-Gi-Oh! Where it's like, hey, the main character always draws the exact card they need. Whereas here, he didn't, and I really liked that that flashback gave a cool explanation as to why. The reason he didn't draw Blaster Blade is because he only had one in his deck. If he had 3, he'd be a lot more likely to draw Blaster Blade when he needs to, but he only had 1. And that is really cool, because we're probably going to see throughout the series him gaining some more Blaster Blades to put in his deck. He can have up to 4. And I can imagine that he's probably going to get more Blaster Blades as he goes on, because, I mean, he's got a Blaster Blade deck. He's not going to do very well if he only has one Blaster Blade. So I really like that. In the previous episode, I mentioned that Koji Ibuki made a small appearance. I guess they were listening to me, and they weren't. These episodes were animated weeks ago, so they weren't actually listening to me. But Koji Ibuki makes a much bigger appearance in this episode. Yeah, he doesn't really do anything too important, but he is there. He's there in the flashbacks this time, and I really like that. For the same reasons I mentioned in the first episode, blending in the stuff from the future with the stuff from the past to kind of create for a more focused sort of thing, where things just don't kind of come out of the blue, out of nowhere. So now even new fans are aware that Koji Ibuki is a character that exists. So that's good. I really like that they focused on Kai moving away a bit more. I quite liked Kai in this episode too. In the original, it was interesting, because in the original version of this episode, one of the kind of problems I had with it is, during the card fight with Aichi, it's kind of implied, at least what I got from it, it's kind of implied that Kai went easy on Aichi, so that Aichi would win the card fight and win his Blaster Blade back, because he felt bad. And so he was using the card fight just as a way to kind of force him to getting into the card game rather than anything else. But the problem I have with it is, after the card fight, Kai basically turns into like a different character, where he turns back to being stern and everything again. And I know the reason they did that was to kind of show that, like, hey, he does have a soft side and everything, you know, he does like Aichi, and he does want to help him succeed, and so, he kind of lets him win the card fight so he can get his Blaster Blade back, and now he's going to get back, and now he's going to get properly into card fighting again. But again, it's the order I didn't like, where he started off kind of soft during the card fight, and then he goes back to being hard again for no real reason. This made more sense. In this, it kind of made it show that Kai was going hard on Aichi during the card fight. He was going a lot harder on him than he was in the original version. But Aichi still wins. And I'm not quite sure if this is because Kai let him win and was just better at hiding it this time. Because it definitely did show that he had the softer kind of shell underneath him. It's just interesting because, again, after the card fight, we visibly see Kai soften up. We see that he's happy that Aichi managed to win his Blaster Blade back, and you can kind of see how important that is to him. And it was really cool to see that they actually recognized each other. In the previous episode, they kind of hinted at it, but in this episode, they outright go, yeah, no, they recognize each other from the past, and that's why we have the flashback sequences and stuff. And they outright mention stuff that happened in the past, like, hey, I gave you that Blaster Blade. He's like, yep, you gave me the Blaster Blade. Yeah, no, I really liked that at the end of this episode ended with them teasing Morikawa as an opponent Aichi will be going against later on. And I like this sticking to that, because I know for a fact that Morikawa is going to turn back into the comedic, like, comedy relief character like he was in the original Vanguard at some point. But I do like that for now they're building him up as a somewhat threatening card fight. So I do quite like that. So far, Aichi has something to work towards, which is good. Because the next few episodes are basically going to be Aichi learning and getting better at the card game. And without the proper motivation, this could just feel kind of random and slow-paced. But I like that once again we are really focused towards the end goal at the moment. We're like, nope. In the previous episode, the goal was to get Blaster Blade back, and now the goal is to get powerful enough to beat Morikawa. I really liked that. That was good. I really liked it when Aichi got back home. He was visibly happy because he won his Blaster Blade back and everything. And his mother says, "Hey, do you think he's happy because he has a girlfriend now?" And I'm like, that was really funny. They're really leaning heavy on the ship baiting in this season. And I don't think I need to explain that to anyone that's seen the new ending theme, but they're really heavily leaning on the kind of undertones between Aichi and Kai. And in my opinion, I don't care either way. I'm like, fair enough. I kind of prefer Aichi with Korin, but I guess that's just because I'm such a big Ultra Rare fan. CardFight was really solid. I really liked it. Honestly, my main problem is it's a little bit shorter than I want it to be. I kind of would have liked it to go on for another episode, but again, trying to ease people in with the first CardFight, so I can see why they kept it so short. But yeah, no, other than that, I don't really have any problems with this episode. None that I can think of off the top of my head. Like, this episode was just really well made. It was really well polished. It had a lot of attention to detail. The animation was great. The soundtrack was great. It of course, added a lot to the overrunning character development and story. There's no real problem with this episode. So, yeah. I'm probably going to be back next week to talk about episode 3 of CardFight Vanguard. I'm really liking this so far. We'll keep going and see how far we get before I start skipping episodes and stuff. But, from the looks of things, I was so impressed by this episode that I'm probably going to be back for the next episode to talk about that one as well. So, yeah, no, see you next week. We're going to be talking about some more Vanguard this time next week. I was really impressed this week. Let's see if next week can top it. I'm interested. Probably not, because I'm not the biggest fan of Kamui. But we'll see.